Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Dinner and a Game as our transition stalls out midway through. As usual, we are just on a roll, folks. So tonight has been a little bit difficult. We had a bunch of people who had a bunch of real life stuff, but as you guys may or may not know, one of the primary things we say here at Dinner and a Game is we always say real life comes first. Everyone who's on this show is on here on a voluntary basis. They're on here because they want to help participate. They want to contribute to the conversations. So we do not hold anyone to anything. If someone comes on our show and they suddenly have to jump out, we completely understand. This is real life, and this is, people have obligations. So, but I did manage to keep at least one panelist, so you don't have to listen to me talk all night by myself. And this is one of our latest cast members. Milagros is joining us for our new, oh my gosh, I forgot the Kingdoms of Mist 5e game that we're going to be starting out next week on Wednesday. It's going to be starting out here on Twitch, and it's going to be at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time starting and run till about 11 p.m. Central Standard Time. Poor Milagros is on the East Coast, so Milagros is going to be staying up till midnight. But thank you so much for joining us, Milagros. We really appreciate it. And the characters that have been created so far are pretty freaking outstanding, and man, we're gonna have some interesting RP situations, and just from the in-character conflicts. So, also, do not forget, if you want to support us, we definitely appreciate it, but it is not required. At Dinner and a Game, we do our best to put out the best content we can, but of course, as with all things, it's based around what we can afford to do. And we try and do our best to make sure that every bit of content we put out is as high quality as possible. But if you want to give us a little boost, give us a little help, you can join our Patreon. If it's ever going to come up. Okay, never mind. It's not working. So Nightbot is not working, so we will have to let that go for now. Nope, he's dead. So anyway, oh wow, thank you so much to Hipster Viking for giving us all those subs out. We greatly appreciate it. But what I was gonna say is we have a lot of topic to get through tonight, and that is going to be, we're talking about a very, very particular topic for this dinner conversation show, and that is death of the author. Now, number one, that's going to happen a lot, unfortunately. 5 gifted subs means 5 bangs. Thank you, Corey. Well, I don't know how much you want revealed about your personal life on the interwebs. I called you Corey when you were on the show, but I didn't know if you want people to know who you are. So yes, that is Corey, ladies and gentlemen. He is the Hipster Viking, and he is sometimes comes on the show when he can, and he is a very generous person, as you can see from all the different subs rolling through there. Thank you so much for that. And unfortunately, I cannot plug anyone's shows right now because our bot's not working. But if you want to check out Corey, you can find him over on TikTok, and I am just manually cutting and pasting now. And he will be there putting out his ideas for Critical Role, putting out his thoughts, submissions for Critical Role. And, of course, Corey is a big-time gamer. He's always talking about D&D stuff, so you'll find him on D&D TikTok, Critical Role TikTok, and that's his actual link to his TikTok. So, tonight's subject, like I said, is Death of the Author. Now, when talking about a subject like this, it's going to get very volatile. And the biggest issue about Death of the Author is we have a very recent situation that has come about that has put this into stark relevance for the geek and gaming community. And that is the subject of J.K. Rowling and all the issues with her, which are far too numerous to be listed on one sheet of paper. But we're not going to start out with Rowling, because I wanted to kind of touch base on a little bit of the history of what Death of the Author actually is. Now, Death of the Author is a term that was created by Roland Bard. He wrote the first tryst on it in like 1967. He was a French author and a French philosopher, and his work was kind of set the precedence for Death of the Author. His premise was that the author of any work is less than a contingent factor on the interpretation of the work. The author's interpretation is not canon. The author's interpretation is simply another interpretation, and the readers are the final judge of the interpretation of the work. That is very specific. That is very specific to the actual process of coming to what Death of the Author has come to mean in modern terms. Death of the Author in modern terms has come to mean that the author has somehow stigmatized themselves from their audience. And so we're going to talk a lot about different authors tonight and how they've done this and what they've done and what the worries are about the situation. And we're going to be referring back to the process of what they did to get to this point. But first, I want you to thank Milagros for being on the show. Thank you so much for sticking with me, Milagros. I was, so terrified that you were going to have something happen too, and then I'll be all by myself.
No, I was super excited about this, especially as like a literature student, because this is something that I am pretty concerned with as like an aspiring author myself.
Yep, and that's another reason I definitely wanted to have you on the show tonight, because this really hits home with you. And Fox, thank you so much. Milagros is gorgeous. But we need to, I wanted to set that kind of canon idea of what it was, because not everyone understands Death of the Author. And it is, in the terms of literary works, it is a modern term, and even a modern form of philosophy. So, is there, other than Rowling, I'm going to start this off with the grandfather of fantasy.
Yep.
And we are going to discuss someone who I am a massive fanboy of. I think I showed Milagros. I have a custom bound copy of Lord of the Rings, the entire book series in one book. And it is custom bound in leather. I had it custom done. I gave it to my wife as an anniversary present because we're both massive fans of J.R.R. Tolkien. But J.R.R. Tolkien had massive problems with his work. And his work was based around his wanting to create a language, so he created a world for it. Now, everyone can look at Tolkien's work and see it as an allegorical reference for his time in World War I. But the funniest thing in the world is Tolkien himself said he never intended Lord of the Rings to be an allegory for World War I, and he said that no one should have taken it that way. And that is, for me, that is kind of really stunning, because it is the way he wrote the battle scenes, the way he described things, and the way he depicted Frodo suffering from what at that time was considered shell shock and now we know as PTSD. I just can't believe that he didn't. I think he might have been, because a lot of people say that Tolkien also suffered from PTSD, and that he was trying to, basically, he was doing self-therapy with his writing. and but he apparently never thought of it that way. So it is, without a doubt, one of the oddest situations I think I've come across with this. But Tolkien's writing, of course, is very troubling because of its obvious depictions. And I think we talked about this the other night, didn't we, Milagros?
Yeah, we did.
So, what did you think about the topics that I kind of brought up about Tolkien and his depiction of the different races and everything like that?
Well, as someone who's among, like, other than learning and studying literature, I'm also studying sociology and anthropology, and the one of like the approaches that I'm being pulled more and more towards is like, you know, the post-colonial perspective on a lot of things, literature on things like identity, gender, sexuality, all of that. And before I even considered the fact that, like, yes, Tolkien is like the grandfather of fantasy. He was the one who made it like an kind of like an adult genre instead of like just fairy tales like for children or mythology from like civilizations long dead. He's the one that made it more of a modern genre that adults would read. And his perspective and what he brings to fantasy, what he brought to fantasy, it colors everything that came after it. And even as like a queer fantasy writer of color, when I set about like creating my world, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to base it off of like traditional fantasy races because I took issue with them. And I knew that when I was in like high school, but I didn't sit with myself and be like, but why? Why is it that I took issue with these things before I even understood a lot about how race is constructed and how that affects real life people? I think, I mean, I'm trying to like be, I'm trying to be nice about
Don't
what
be
I want to
nice.
say.
Don't be nice.
It's like,
You know, there's no there is no filter on this. I mean, say what you want to say. Be honest about your opinions, and you know, you have a voice. You know what I mean?
okay,
So we can we use our voice here in any way, shape, or form we can.
okay. I think a lot of the like races in like Tolkien's work aren't just like fantasy races. I think they're racist. Like like it just straight up it's just racism with magic sprinkles on it. Like the way that like orcs are described are they're caricatures of not just like East Asian peoples, but like this idea of the dangerous predatory Mongolian as a existential threat to Western society, and him as I believe he was British, right? Tolkien was British.
Yes, he was very much so.
Yeah. So when he was writing, so the peak of the British Empire in terms of like power, influence, wealth was a couple of decades before the Lord of the Rings were written.
Sorry, say that again.
A couple of the well, like the peak of the British Empire's influence, power, wealth was like a few decades before Tolkien wrote these books.
Yeah, the absolute peak was during the Victorian era, which technically ended around 1910.
Yeah.
So right at the point where Tolkien was starting the composition of the books.
And he was from the interior of the Empire. That is a very different perspective than being like in a satellite area that's like, you know, like for example, areas of like South Africa that are very white dominated, and therefore retain aspects of like British culture and the colonized culture, is like Tolkien's perspective as like a a white British man who grew up during like the teetering off of the British Empire's peak would be very different than a colonized person, very different from a white British man growing up in the colonies. He's in the interior. He is surrounded by the empire's culture, and that is going to affect the way that he portrayed like these non-white coded races. And it's everywhere in these books. And that's one of like even the idea, and this is something that I've built an entire database for my own fantasy world so that I could avoid this. The idea in a lot of fantasy canons of there being evil races, and there being like they're like tying morality, behavior and psychology to these races. I'm sorry, is my mic doing something?
My mic, I'm pretty sure. I'm cranking it down a little bit.
Okay.
There you go. Oh, sorry about that, guys.
Okay. But yeah, just the idea at all of having like these are the good races, bad races. That just in and of itself is racist. It's racism. Even if they're not real, it reflects on the relation between like human races and ethnicities. And one thing that to kind of like tie all this together, no kind of imaginative creation comes from a vacuum. No like creative idea springs fully formed from the forehead of the creator. Oh no.
I did it. It was my fault.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You're getting an echo, but I fixed it. It was on my end, technical.
Okay. Yeah, so like these Tolkien was not a creation god who, beamed these books onto a page. He was a person. He was a person with an upbringing in an empire. And the way that they looked at the people that they conquered is going to be part of how he looks at people who aren't like him, and who he determined as like him versus not like him in these books influenced so much of the world building and the characterization and who is on what side of the conflict. And that's where a lot of my criticism of him comes from, because I can read those books and know that I would not be included in the side that is humanized. And so it's not particularly fun for, me to engage with it. And it's why I look for fantasy that comes from other authors, because for me, who the author is does very much matter and affect, the way that I will read their work.
Of course. And that is a huge situation to look at when you're looking at Tolkien's work, along with all that colonialism and the conditioning that colonialism brings to the colonizers. Because Tolkien was raised in a period and time frame where he was not only indoctrinated to think that way, but he was indoctrinated to think that there was, well, it's part of the indoctrination process, but he was brought up to think that there was absolutely nothing wrong with the way he was thinking. So it kind of breaks it down into, on one hand, he had absolutely no idea what he was doing, because there was nothing culturally to stop him, nothing culturally to put him at ease on it. And the only points of contact he had with that other culture was being forced to fight them and kill them for the government that was causing all the issues. So, this is one of the situations where we look at this and we're looking at the situation with Death of the Author, and we understand that there is this not even microcosm, there is this whole effect system that is happening that basically lined everything up to put Tolkien in the perfect storm to write these novels based on situations that happened in his life that he could not accept he was doing, because he was so traumatized from the horrific events that he wrote about. and he fictionalized to write about. And so it goes into this weird it is, and the big thing about it is people want to excuse the situation because of those factors. But the only thing we can do is we can look at it from a clinical point of view and take in those factors and recognize that there are problems with that portion of it. Now, here's the one thing about Death of the Author. At this point, now, as an audience, we have to look back on this situation and say, can we condone supporting those works, even though they have those issues? Because we should be able to look back on these works coming from previous eras and previous decades and be able to apply a filter of, understanding from the point of view of what the author was coming from. So it kind of, is that even number one, is that even a possibility to be considered, or should the works just be taken at face value? And number two, if it even is a possibility to consider, is that something that we can actually support? So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, and now I'm like going through and thinking of like, okay, well, what works and what like creatives do I idolize that I also know have a lot of like issues? So right off the top of my head was Bram Stoker's Dracula. I love the Gothic genre at the same time that I am aware that it emerged straight out of the British Empire, and that a lot of the literature during the Victorian era was Britain's attempt to kind of sanitize itself and paint itself as like delicate and like the height of civilization at a time when most of the world was under its heel. And so like
I was going to say, and there's another portion to that. There's also the aspect of, at the same time Bram Stoker's Dracula was written and released, you had Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein. And Frankenstein is just an allegory for the victimization and the degradation of women in British society. And, how they were basically made to fit into something, created to be something, and never given any choice.
Yes.
So, so Mary Shelley, there was problems with her writing too, but Mary Shelley, was flipping things on its ear at the same time that Bram Stoker was kind of writing rape fantasies. So,
well, and here's where like this is where it's like, it can get fun. Well, to start, their big issue, with like where vampire mythology, where is specifically the vampire mythology that Bram Stoker was drawing on, comes from, a lot of it is anti-Semitic, a lot of it is racist, a lot of it has to do with Eastern Europe's proximity to the East as this, corrosive monoculture, and how like, you can't trust people who are coming from that part of the world. They're, unclean, they're dangerous, they're the nature of vampires, to infect and to spread. Whatever culture you tie that to is going to translate as like, like they are a contagious, like dirty, monstrous, kind of force culturally, and they are contagious, and therefore no like any form of contact is terrible and dangerous. And so a lot
and
of
can weaken and lessen. You know what I mean?
And yes,
like they were absolutely against interbreeding and everything like that, because they thought it would weaken the bloodline and contaminate the blood. And so that was another big thing that those themes took off of, was purity, racial purity, and that was also, well, freaking horrible. But one of the other things I was going to ask, actually, Foxrider made a point. She was saying that she finds in the cases of they didn't know any better, but we do. So we have to accept that there are problems, but be aware of why there are problems to start with. And so that's, so I guess Foxrider is saying that she, that it is something that still can be consumed, but you have to understand. You have to be at a point where you can understand what the problems are with the work before you dive into it. Yes. So, and Foxrider, and I replied back and I said, yeah, there are other factors, and the big thing is that the authors themselves are not here to defend their works anymore. There's no way to get what their intent was. But that returns back to the whole death of the author concept. Is the author's intent anything beyond just another opinion on the book? Because the book is completed. The book is done. It's been sent out into the world. So the author has finished with the book. Now this hits you particularly, Milagros, because you are a literature student. So, and you are intending to be an author and a writer. And by the way, I can't wait to read stuff. But anyway, but so once the author has performed the act of creation and released it, does the author have any hold over the work anymore, or is it does it belong to the world at large?
I think, and this is where it gets hard, because this is also something that my mother is a visual traditional artist. She's an oil painter, and something that she's trying to get my sister, who is also an artist, we're just a whole family of artists, that she's trying to get us to understand as we get older and start to look towards an actual career as artists, is once you have created something and once you can put your finishing touches, whatever. And this is something that leads certain creators to just never finish their work because they want to get it perfect, and perfect doesn't strictly exist. Yeah, once you let it go, yes,
could not let go.
Once you let it go, it's gone. And there are certain ways that modern authors can interact with their audience in ways that weren't really possible before. But once you let it go, and once somebody else has an idea of your work in their head, that belongs to them. And one example, I pulled up the Wikipedia page for The Outsiders, the novel, was the author's still alive, I think. Pretty sure she's still alive. She got into Twitter beef with some fans of the books because The Outsiders is something that in a lot of American public schools you read around middle school. I read it in the 8th grade. My sister read my copy in the 8th grade. And something that a lot of readers notice or interpret about this book is that it's gay as hell. A lot of people read it and are like, these boys are in love with each other. This is really, really gay. And the reason for that is, I have so many opinions about Anne Rice. I'm going to get to her. This is leading to her. So the author, S.C. Hinton, who wrote The Outsiders, mind you, she started writing it when she was 15. Mm-hmm. She finished writing it and published it when she was 18. I think my personal kind of theory is that she wrote the book is a lot of the book is from the perspective of these young greaser boys. Mm-hmm. And she was writing it as a high school girl who liked boys. Right. And by writing from their perspective, she was applying kind of her own attraction to these characters in the way that they look at each other, because she was writing it as a teen girl, and they're all described as they're handsome, they're counterculture, but they're still gentlemen, and they're noble, all these things. She was writing it as a 15-year-old girl, but I don't think she accounted for the fact that she was writing a 15-year-old girl's gaze and voice through a character who was a teenage boy. Mm-hmm. And so the way that comes across to a lot of fans who read it now is, these boys gay. And she got into fights with fans on Twitter being like, they're not gay, they're so straight, that's not how I wrote it. And some people tried explaining to her well, maybe you didn't intend for it to be that way, but this is how it comes across on this end. And she was like, no, that's not how I wrote it. And so you can do your best to communicate your ideas, and like you can, you know, revise and rewrite as many times as you want, but you can't control the minds of other people, and you don't know who is going to come in contact with your work and who is going to read it, and therefore how they are going to interpret it. And I think that they should be allowed to have their interpretation, because they're a different person, and this is something that naturally happens. It's part of creativity being collaborative, even when it's technically like one person writes a book, but the other person in reading it creates their own version of the story.
Mm-hmm. So here's so since we've kind of moved into more modern authors with the step into S.E. Hinton, here's another author who's is problematic, but for different reasons. Orson Scott Card. Now, Orson Scott Card wrote a series of sci-fi novels based around a character called Ender, and they're called Ender's Game, Ender's Gambit,
Oh
and
my
everything
god!
like that. Yes,
Yeah.
and so Orson Scott Card himself. Oops. Sorry, my headset keeps turning itself off. Orson Scott Card himself turned out to be incredibly anti-Semitic, fairly heavily racist, but his books were written strictly from the point of view, and he kind of stated it, but he didn't really, but his characters were all white Anglo-Saxons, blah 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 blah. He did not write a single other ethnicity into any of his characters, and so there wasn't really opportunity for him to display that, other than the fact that there was no one else but white people in his entire book. So it ends up coming around, but it ends up coming around as, you know, this is another aspect of the modern aspect of Death of the Author. Orson Scott Card's fiction is incredibly well loved, and the Ender Game series is insanely popular. It still sells well. Orson Scott Card is richer. I don't even know if he's still alive. Is richer than, you know, rich, because of everything that he has, you know, gone through, or all of his book sales and everything like that. But at the same time, he now has this horrible platform where he gets to espouse his horrible views to an audience who loves his work but may not know the man. So that is a new aspect of Death of the Author, and that aspect is when an author becomes problematic, what is a fan to do? What is someone who grew up loving the work supposed to do when the author themselves is the problem? Now, this leads directly into something the Foxwriter commented about. Anne Rice.
Oh my god.
Whew.
Oh, he's
Thank
still
you,
alive.
Foxwriter.
Thank you.
I thought he was, because I remember he hated the movie. But I didn't know if he was still alive at this time. So yes, thank you, Foxwriter. Foxwriter is officially a researcher. But yes, so Orson Scott Card. But now we get into Anne Rice. Two things about Anne Rice. Number one, the entire world of the vampires and the witches and everything like that came from a point of view of this was her world. She is one of the most litigious authors when it comes to fan fiction. If anyone attempts to take her characters and compose anything with them, and it in any way becomes popular, like if it's on like a web page that has ads on it or anything, yeah, she sues people, Foxwriter, constantly.
12-year-olds.
She sues everybody. But if it's on any site that has any type of advertising, even if it's like, you know, some site that forces you to have ads on it because it's how the fight suns. There used to be a thing called GeoCities, and it was free for you to create web pages on, and she basically, you know, but you would, that's where a lot of people would post stuff like fanfic and stuff like that. She would sue them because there were advertisements going on that she could contentiously say were allowing someone to profit off of that fan fiction, and therefore she could sue them for copyright infringement.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right, Fictere. Yeah, and so she would basically, and she still to this day says she hates fan fiction. That people should read her works as she intended them, with no other outside interpretation.
I just like I'm hearing this and like I know it's a thing. She's the reason that like when I was I didn't know why at the time. But like when I was 13 and I started writing like fan fiction, which has led to me now like getting a degree in this stuff and like all that. Yes, I was putting disclaimers on my fanfics, not knowing why, but knowing that it's something everyone did and you had to do it or the fanfiction boogeyman was going to get you. It was Anne Rice. It was Anne Rice. I didn't realize that it was her, and I didn't realize it was her. I was stunned when I found out that it was her because my mom is an Anne Rice fan, like a huge one.
Yep.
And she isn't really present online, and she, you know, it's never really been, the internet space has never really been for her, so she had no idea. And it was so funny when I found out and I went to her and I was like just devastated. I was like, Mom, one of your favorite authors hates like fan fiction and fan works, and like, you know, we ended up having our own kind of like, we still discuss this because she wants to know like what I think about like, oh, but someone taking your characters. And I'm like, okay, here's the thing. At least from the perspective of like my generation, I was born in 1999. I turned 21 last September. I grew up like in fandom spaces. The way that like my generation views like fan creation and like fandom is different, I think, than previous generations, because now fandom is like kind of the point. Like, you know, the point, the aspiration is to have fan works and fan art, fan fiction, cosplay. Like that means that people care and that your work has resonated with someone enough that they created something in your world with your characters, that they care, that they've become so important to someone else. I have a author that's like my comfort author. I wouldn't say she's like my favorite, but she's my comfort author. Like the reason that I changed careers from wanting to be like a vocalist to wanting to be a author started with writing a fan fiction of like my comfort author's work with like an original character, because I wanted more diversity, because she writes mostly white characters. But I created an original character that was a person of color and started writing like OC insert fan fiction, and that turned into my first novel length project. And I realized, oh shit, like I can actually, yeah, I could talk about her if you want. Because I've actually watched her go from pretty like side-eyeing her stuff, being like, Janine, that's a little, you know, to she's still writing, she's still putting out books. She put out a book last month, and I have read 17 of her books that she has published over the course of over like 15 years. And I've watched her in real time go from biphobic, like writing pretty caricaturish characters of color, you know, having kind of sketchy views on like racial mixing and stuff like that, to like full on like in-universe advocacy and having two canon bisexual protagonists whose relationships with another gender and the same gender are treated as not only worthy of respect but as integral parts of their character, and they're treated equally to other characters like former lovers and things like that. Like I've watched her go in real time from pretty problematic to like, oh shit, like she's learning and she's incorporating what she's learning.
That brings in another aspect of the modern version of Death of Author, because and I'll bring up one of the authors that I researched about for this because of what he did. John Green. You familiar? Okay. So John Green is a modern author who grew up writing fanfic and became an author because of it. and because of all the experiences that led up to him writing A Fault in Our Stars. And John Green put himself in the book. Spoilers for those who have not seen A Fault in Our Stars.
Oh,
there is a character in A Fault in the Stars that John Green based himself, and he's a bitter old author. Okay? And he is actually the subject of, other than the two main characters, he is the other subject of the entire book. Okay? So, but John Green based that character around himself because that was his, because he knew he was not going to write another novel about these characters. A Fault in the Stars was going to be the end of the story, and he knew that he was going to leave the end of the story with an ambiguous ending. So he put the explanation for that in the book by creating himself in the book and giving himself a voice in the book. And he's spoken on that many times. And it was like, you know, if people wanted, what he said was, I am not going to take the time to tell people no. When you put the work out there, you're giving it to them. It belongs to them. It says they're going to make their own interpretations. They deserve to have the questions answered. So I'm putting the answer in the book by creating a character who represents me to tell them that I don't have that answer. I left it like that on purpose, and I just don't have the answer. And sometimes it's not fair, but that's what I intended. And that way, you have to respect that because that was my intent. You decide where they go. I gave it to you. And so that was kind of really like an intense kind of little synopsis. When I heard him say that, it was kind of like, well, that's number one, kind of smart. And number two, that's, not going to really satisfy anyone.
No, like people are still going to be like, okay, so what's the answer then?
So since we're rounding up into more other modern authors, and John Green is a great author and everything like that, but he brought us in. His work is wonderful and amazing, but there are even people who have problems with it because they considered it exploitive of the situation that the young woman went through who he wrote the novel about. I mean, it's a fictionalized account and everything like that, but so because it wasn't technically just his story, but he had blessings from her family and everything, but it still wasn't his story, so he caught heat for that. So the book.
I'm sick of this shit.
No, I want answers. But that's the whole point of the book. People. It's a repeated theme throughout the book. People want answers, and sometimes there just aren't any. So anyway, that's off subject. So the next, the other authors I wanted to talk about is George R.R. Martin. Another author that I'm a huge fan of, but I'm a fan of his because he's problematic. I'm a fan of his because I like gritty stories, and he put in powerful characters in the stories, that were female, that were male, that were everything like that, but he still had misogyny in there, and he still had horrible acts of deplorable actions, rape, assault, everything was still there. But there was also female characters who would chop people's heads off and blah, 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 blah. So he just left scenes in there because there was horrible people in the books. But at the same time, he did a lot of defending of those scenes. And he did a lot of way too much descriptive in those scenes. And you're talking about, triggers, massive triggers on a massive level. And, a lot of people talk about trigger warnings, and a lot of people are very disdainful of trigger warnings, and they're very disdainful of, people who require trigger warnings. But that's kind of ridiculous. Just looking on bare numbers, the amount of people who have been victims of sexual assault. And I don't talk about it a shit ton, but I'm personally a victim of sexual assault in my 20s. And so it is, anyone can be someone who may be triggered by these scenes. So to say that, this is not something that should be there, and that an author may want to actually think about what they're writing, at least enough to put in some kind of warnings. Because there's no rating system for books.
No, which there should be. There should be tags, I think. If I have a printing press, I'm going to do that. I'm going to start putting tags, not just like fun tropes, but also like, hey, if this isn't your cup of tea, put it back. Like, oh my God. Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. So I personally,
no problem, Frank. Thank you.
Like, yeah, bye Frank. By the time I by the time I was like old enough to like, not even old enough, because I was watching like Resident Evil at 8 years old. By the time I was interested, it's not bad. Like, it's not bad.
Okay, well, yeah, Resident Evil's super campy. So there you go.
Well, like, here's like slight side tangent, but like in my house, my parents had a very different idea of like what was age appropriate. They thought that violence and to a degree sexuality was age appropriate, but they didn't want to encourage like shitty bratty behavior. So like my sister and I were allowed to watch not even allowed. My dad raised me on a steady media diet of like Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, the Underworld series, Resident Evil, X-Men, all that stuff, because he wanted me to have like strong female role models. And then he was like, how'd you turn out a lesbian? I'm like, dude, like, are you kidding me? Like,
that's brilliant.
Like, he was like, why are you a lesbian now? I'm like, Mystique was naked on screen the whole time, just kicking people in the face. Like, okay. But I wasn't allowed to watch like live action Disney or Nickelodeon or like anything like that where like the teenagers were mean to their parents. And so like my parents thought that like, like campy violence, totally fine. Romance, they were like, yes, like you should get to see people in love and expressing that kind of affection for each other. That's a positive thing. But they didn't let me near certain like documentaries. I wasn't allowed to play Assassin's Creed because they found aspects of that like brutal and violent in a way that wasn't like, haha, zombie head explode, but like, that's a person and you're gutting them alive on screen. Like, that's horrible. And I feel, and like one of my criticisms of like gritty, realistic, especially, oh my God, like pseudo medieval, because like if there's potatoes in there, you're already not historically accurate, and I'm gonna fight you on that. Like this, and I was on a historical drama kick for a few months last semester of college, and it was something that I noticed there as well, and something that I know is all over Game of Thrones is like, okay, you want to be like gritty and realistic with like violence against women and misogyny and racism, homophobia as well, because there's usually in a lot of dramas, like historical dramas, actually, like a lot, there's like a couple of canon queer characters. And you'll be realistic about, I'm saying you as in like the creators, they will choose to be realistic about the brutality and the violence and the hatred that marginalized people faced. But why are all your women clean shaven and everybody's teeth are perfect and everybody's got like makeup and everyone looks conventionally attractive and their hair is perfect? And like, okay, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, everybody's teeth should be falling out. Everybody better be hairier than a Yeti. Everybody better be
over 30
dirty,
years
like,
old should walk with a cane.
Yeah, like, but you're not gonna, like, you won't portray, and including like these female characters who are victims of sexual assault and rape on screen, full on in your face. Like, they are hairless. They are completely conventionally attractive. Like okay, so you think that armpit hair is too brutal for the big screen, but like rape is fine. Like to portray, like we're not gonna portray hairy legs. That's disgusting. It's horrific. It's traumatizing. Think of the children. But rape, like we, like you know. And so that's an issue that I take with a lot of this stuff. Is like, okay, so you find that to a degree worse. Like you won't portray it, then these horrible things that so many people have to deal with and like will then witness as part of like, and don't even get me started as how it's used in like a narrative sense, like how it's used as like to advance character, or the worst when like a male main character's property, I mean love interest, is assaulted to make him feel bad. Like it's not even about the person who was hurt.
God, yeah.
And so I think, yeah, like I'm all of that, I'm like, that is garbage, like straight up. Like you don't need to portray it on screen or on the page. Like you don't have to be in my face about it. It's disrespectful to treat it in this like almost pornographic way of like you got to get all in the deep. No, 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 no. That why is that something you feel the need to focus on and write in such detail? Like why is that? And also like why is she hot and this is happening? And like what are you getting out of this scene? And actual human beings have to portray this, and the actress has to be put through a pantomime of this experience over and over because nothing happens in one one take.
Yeah.
And so like there's so many people hurt in the process of like you just had to include this. I think that's like really shitty.
Yep. I mean that's what I was trying to. That's where I was kind of going with it. Is we have ratings on movies, but we don't have ratings on books. And so it's kind of like Jessica was saying something about Katie Sagal. What about Katie Sagal? Jessica's in the Skype chat.
Yeah.
Well, she can explain in text. So. But yeah, so yes, I know my cat's in heat. Sorry, she's a baby kitten and she went into her first heat and she's super loud. I apologize. I was hoping my noise filter could contain it, but man, she is loud. She's gonna go get fixed. We don't know if the vet will do it because she's in heat. But as soon as she stops screaming, like magic, it's gone.
Yay!
Maybe someone stuck her in a bag. So anyway, so now let's go ahead and jump on the horse that we're gonna beat to death. Rowling.
Let's go.
So, Rowling is one of those people that death in the author was meant for. Yeah, Fox gets a bat ready. Okay, so Rowling cannot let go of her work in any way, shape, or form. Although she does encourage fan fiction, she doesn't have any problem with fan fiction. She can completely separate fan fiction from her writings, and she condones it and enjoys it and reads it. However, Rowling herself can't let her characters go. The first thing that ever happened that indicated this was during an interview. I don't even remember. It was 2014. I think it was 2014. She declared openly in an interview, like she just kept her fucking mouth shut.
Literally, just shut up, JK. Just shut up.
Actually, she's like Trump. She should have her Twitter taken away. But,
literally.
But during an interview,
you live in a castle. Just shut up. Leave us alone.
Yeah, but during an interview in 2014, Rowling declared that she had always thought of and she tried to represent Voldemort as being gay. And that,
you mean Dumbledore?
No, sorry, Dumbledore. My bad.
Oh,
Dumbledore.
I was like, she made Voldemort gay
she
too?
didn't. She didn't. It was sorry, I misspoke. And so she had all this. She went through all that. there was all that flack about it. You know, all the audience going nuts, saying, you know, some of them saying you're just virtue signaling, you're ruining children's childhoods, you're putting views on children that they don't need to be thinking about, the usual horrible shit that people say when something like this comes out. But, and this is not, because she said other things after that that proved how horrible she was, but it turns out that all those people who said that she was just virtue signaling and everything like that were completely right. Because move it ahead to 2018 and we get Fantastic Beasts. And we get a situation where Dumbledore and Grindelwald are of the age where their relationship should have been in full swing. And it should have been a very contentious relationship. There should have been something there that was displayed to show they had that connection at one time. She had the chance to write this as a gay couple who would split and now had completely different worldviews, but still had that history of having been in love. And she said fucking no. She told the director no.
He said, ew, gays? Not in my house.
Oh, thanks, Game Raider Girl. Thanks for the
hi.
raid. We really appreciate it. Yeah, so she basically came forward and the director was given notes from her telling him not to play up the romanticized angle, not to play up the angles of the homosexual relationship between Voldemort or the relationship at all. Sorry, I always see Voldemort. Between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. She was told not to play up those aspects in any way, shape, or form. Oh, the director was. In either movie. And thank you very much for the follows, everybody. Thank you, Game Raider Girl, for the follow. Thank you very much, Cylin21, for the follow.
Okay,
really appreciate it.
Let me just say something. I know 3 different people with Harry Potter tattoos. So if you haven't gone that far, more power to you, because they feel real bad right now.
Well, here's the thing. Although, and this is all this, I've said this in freaking Facebook on our Dinner and Games Facebook page. I have said this there. I wish there were literally some way that Rowling's ability to write canon material in her own world could be taken away, because I honestly worry, with her still having that voice and having that audience, what type of damage she could do to young people growing up who are trying to deal with the fact that they're discovering their own sexuality. They may not, they may be different than other people. They may already be feeling all those feelings, having all those issues. Thank you very much, Cynthia21.
Canon privileges revoked.
But yeah, so the biggest issue is she has the ability to affect how they may see themselves through characters she writes. And she's already shown how transphobic and how just awful she is. And just thinking about her having that potential to damage young people because she still has this massive platform, it really kind of hurts. You know? Especially because I love the shit out of the Harry Potter world. I was even considering writing an RPG source book for it. But now it's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do with all these feelings this world evoked and all this concerning character for the characters and everything like that? And now the character still exists. And the story still exists. Although there's tons of problems with the story. Don't even get... She's not the best writer.
She's not.
No, she's not.
She is not.
But, you know, there's tons of problems with the story. There's tons of problems with, you know, it in general. Not just the problems with Rowling herself. There's tons of problems inside the book. But, you know, what are all these people who, like... And there's people who started... This is maybe one of the first real novels they ever read. And then they lived with these novels. And they grew up with these novels. And then they went to the movies. And they grew up with the movies. And now they have all this deep-seated love because it brought them into the world that we all occupy. It was their gateway into geekdom. Mm-hmm. You know? And now that's all tainted. And there's no way we can stop Rowling. It's a horrible and almost untenable situation to be in.
Mm.
Because why would we want to destroy the wizarding world?
Yeah, see, that's something that I like I'm lucky that one, my comfort author that I've been following for 10 years has become better instead of worse. That's something that I'm genuinely really grateful for. Because I grew up in her, universe, and it's expanded a ton since, the books first started. And she's not very well known, which I prefer because I don't want to be able to name her and have people be like, "Oh, those books," because they're paranormal romance and there's some in them, but at this point I skip over because it's straight and I don't care. I genuinely am there for the plot, but
it's not Hamilton, is it?
No.
Okay.
No. It's a paranormal romance series.
You don't have to name it if you don't want to.
It was written
it's your dirty little secret.
It was written for horny middle-aged women, and I'm the one person who's like, "Hi, I'm a college senior, and I really like your books." But I'm really grateful that my, and just to bring in discussions about neurodivergence and stuff like that. I'm autistic. I have ADHD. I also have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and for a lot of my life used reading to cope with stuff, and maladaptive daydreaming and all that stuff of sorry, I'm just gonna stare out the window for 12 hours and just be in this world literally because that's how I got through life.
Excuse me while I disassociate.
Yeah, I am not even here. I got my earbuds in, I'm levitating. And I understand to a degree I'm glad that I haven't had to go through that with any of my nostalgia things. Not in the way with J.K. Rowling, because the stuff that I grew up with was Star Wars, which George Lucas is a dumpster fire, but I migrated to he is not the sole creator in the way that J.K. Rowling is, where his work has been handed off to all different kinds of creators. The Clone Wars series is excellent and dealt with a lot of serious issues with marginalized people. I loved those. The extended universe novelizations have queer characters, freaking genderless alien races, all this cool stuff. He is not the ruler of that universe, and so even he can lose his mind all he wants, and the rest of us yeah, whatever, Lucas. But J.K. Rowling is kind of a monarch in terms of the wizarding world, and I will admit to a degree of irritation with I grew up not being allowed to read Harry Potter. My parents were Catholic and thought that it was promoting witchcraft and all those things. So I never touched any of those books, and then wasn't allowed to watch the movies either. By the time my parents loosened up about Harry Potter, I had other stuff that I liked, and I was it's not my thing. I didn't get into it at the age that it would have become a part of my identity. And so I was whatever. And then I was well, surely one day it'll stop being popular and I'll be able to move on. And it just hasn't. And the older I get and the more that it just continues to have momentum, the more I'm okay, now I hate it on principle. Because I go to college for literature. I run and started a student organization about long form writing. And every time I'm oh no, I haven't read Harry Potter. People act like I just said a slur.
Yep.
I know my Hogwarts house. I was forced to take the quiz by a friend of mine. I'm a Hufflepuff. Whatever that means. I don't know and I don't care. I just know they have yellow and badgers or something. It's not something that... Yeah, oh yeah. I know a lot of there was a point in time where Harry Potter was rebellious because it was it was for the kid. I know it had that. It doesn't have that anymore. J.K. Rowling's awful, very publicly, very loudly awful. And there is a sentiment that has emerged among a lot of like fans of genre fiction, speculative fiction, fantasy, who are people of color, who are queer, but it's mostly people of color that are like, if you're a Harry Potter fan, don't talk to me because like, like, and this sounds so mean, but like,
well, the whole thing with the house elves being
yes, like that's oh my god,
being slaves, but if they weren't slaves, they didn't know what to do with themselves, and
it's chattel slavery plus anti-Semitic caricatures. How did you do that in one? How'd you do a 2-for-1 in that? Like, it's something that like now that I remember when J.K. Rowling first started acting up, and again, this is gonna seem really mean. I remember when J.K. Rowling first started acting up, I was like, yes, I've hated these books for years, and now I can be out about it and say that it's because she sucks. But in reality, it was me being bitter and being like, can you guys just be quiet? I've been to, like, please, if you're a whole adult with children and it seems like these are the only books you've ever read in your life, I'm concerned about you. Stop talking about it. Because they're like, I understand if it's like a thing that like you love and that resonates with you. I think part of what differentiates my experience as a fan from other fans, and this like all the dots just got connected. I think part of it is that my experience consistently, yes, oh, the Harry Potter fandom's a cult, period. No one's allowed to no one's allowed to criticize the cult leader. Like, nope. Or the cult itself, the deity that is the Wizarding World. But I think one of the things that has defined my experience as a fan enough that like I don't let media, even media that I love, become too close to my heart, because other than like the stuff that I have created from scratch for myself by myself, I have always so I'm a person that lives at the intersection of a ton of marginalized identities. I'm one of those people that like if you made me into a character and like put them out into the world, you would have every alt-right motherfucker climbing down your throat being like, that's not realistic, one person can't be all those things. Like, I'm intersex, I'm non-binary, I'm mixed ethnicity Latino, I'm a lesbian, I'm disabled, chronically ill, neurodivergent, I'm fat. Like, it just keeps going. Like, Jesus Christ. I haven't caught a break since I was born. Like, shit. My experience as a fan has been defined by alienation from even speculative fiction. Like, I can't catch a break. Even in fiction, there is racism, there is misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, like, even in fiction, I'm under attack by the creators of these worlds. If I get some form of representation, it's usually bad. If it's not bad, it's like, if it's not bad as in like I'm a supervillain, it's bad as in it's a caricature, it's two-dimensional, it's based on a stereotype. And if it's good, it's because there are certain aspects of my identities, like a couple of my identities will be portrayed positively and the rest will be vilified. My favorite example of this is Brooklyn Nine-Nine. They managed to not be racist, woohoo. They managed to not be transphobic, woohoo. Not homophobic, not like ableist, but they are extremely fatphobic to the point that there are literally just two characters whose sole purpose in the entire show is to be fat jokes. And so I was like, sweet, like there's two Latinas, they're different, there's one who's bisexual, like all these things, da da da. And I was like, woohoo, like I think I'm finally safe. Oh shit, they hate fat people. Like, there is literally no universe other than the one I am creating from scratch with my bare hands out of like toothpicks and spite that does not hate some aspect of my identity. And so like my phases and my love for a lot of, you know, fictional universes is love at arm's length, because I know that ultimately the creator and the fans don't respect me as a whole person. I grew up a fan of X-Men, which has all these great allegories for like marginalized people, but there isn't much in terms of actual representation of different intersectional marginalized groups. Same thing with Star Wars, it's speculative fiction. You know, the trio was white, and then the new trilogy was like, woohoo, let's throw Finn under the bus. We're not making Finn and Poe gay. We're gonna romanticize a bunch of Nazis. The fucking Reylo showed up and nuked everybody. Like, you know, I was a fan of the MCU. That is straight up American military propaganda. Like, shit. Let's not even talk about, like, so every time I get into something where I'm like, oh, this almost resonates, almost, but I know that my experience is still so fundamentally different than the author could ever understand, than most of the fans, and then the characters. And so I actually haven't had all the way the experience of feeling immersed and like I could be part of a speculative fiction world, other than my own, which has been my primary creative drive and my primary special interest for almost 5 years. Because I hit the point where I was like, man, if I want to feel safe, I'm just gonna have to do it my fucking self. And then I did, and I'm still working on it. And so I have a degree of sympathy for, you know, people who love these worlds deeply and feel like they are part of. Speculative fiction is just a blanket term for like fantasy and sci-fi and like urban fantasy. Space wizards, yeah. It's like fantasy, all of that stuff.
Yeah, everyone tries to, a lot of people try to say the Star Wars is actually fantasy because you may have all this tech, but you still have a magical force. So it's space wizards. So
space wizards, yeah. So I understand, you know, like to a degree, you know, like, oh man, like you're a beloved creator letting you down, but I don't understand clinging to the world, because every time I've found like, oh, I can't feel safe here either, I drop it. Like the MCU is one of my biggest, like most intense fandom phases. And I was in love with, specifically after Captain America Winter Soldier, I became really attached to like the Stucky dynamic, and there were people making like, oh, all the Avengers live in the tower and hang out like friggin' college students, and like Natasha, Sam, Steve, and Bucky are in a polycule, and like Bucky has a therapy dog and all these things. And it was wonderful because through Bucky, like disabled people and chronically ill people got representation, because he is disabled. He's friggin' missing a limb. That's a disability as a prosthetic.
Not to mention the mental handicaps that he has from all the the conditioning and everything like that.
And Steve having like dealing with like PTSD, and Bucky being like nonverbal at times, and then autistic fans can get in on it. Sam was a man of color, a dark-skinned man of color, and so fans of color, we got our own spot. And like Natasha was there for like, you know, the ladies, and like it was wonderful for 2 years. And then Captain America Civil War came out, and my enthusiasm was crushed, because like the creators saw how hard all the fans were like, Steve and Bucky are fucking married, which that's their fault. That is their fault for making those two gay. I'm with you till the end of the line is just till death do us part. Okay, Marvel, they're married. You made them married. That's on you. And like they made it not a Cap movie. They made it like a friggin' Avengers movie. They put too much Robert Downey Jr. The argument between like Team Cap and Team Iron Man, you know, split the fandom in half. And, you know, all of this stuff came out, and I was like, oh, like I had my little couple of years of like, oh, what if I could be included? And then the creators were like, no. And instead of being like, well, then I'm going to take it for myself, I was like, fuck you too then. Bye. So like, I haven't had that experience of like, no, I'm not going to let you go. I was barely welcome here in the first place. You trying to kick me out? All right, I'll see myself out. I quit. Like, because except for literally my own work where it's me in a one-person fandom of me and me, like that is where I feel safe, and I had to create it. And so for me, with because I'm also learning in school about like creative interpretation and like what, because there's a lot of different theories around what makes a piece of media valuable and what makes it good. There's a lot of arguments over that. And, you know, there's like the aesthetic route of like, if it's appealing and it made me feel good and it was fun. I agree. I agree, Foxrider. Yeah.
Foxrider said that a lot of people cling to so hard to their favorite authors because they themselves share similar views and don't want to admit that it is a problem.
I think that's the case with a lot of like
fucking fighting representation for the horribles.
Yes, like, and I think that's the thing with like a lot of fantasy where like the races are straight up racist. And white fans will be like, I don't see a problem. And we're like, it's because they didn't make you into monster people. You're not the monster people. Do you think we're monster people? Like,
yeah, and here's the funny thing. You know, white people, you know, it is so fucking hilarious. Because white people be like, well, they're not white, they're Nazis. It's like, what the fuck do you think a Nazi is?
that's just white person deluxe. Like,
yeah. Their literal goal is blonde eyes and blue fucking hair for everybody.
Yeah. It's
like, Christ, man, really?
What do you think that means?
So holy fuck.
Yeah,
there's a lot of denial going on.
There is, and so like I feel like there's the aesthetic of like, oh, I had fun, it was pretty, it was that sort, that's like, aesthetics have their own merit, but there's also, and there's a lot of approaches, but one of the approaches that I find
blonde eyes and blue hair. Yeah, I know I messed up.
Eyes and blue hair. They want us all to be blue nets.
There you go.
I know that there's the kind of school of thought that's resonated the most with me because of my experiences and as an intersectionally marginalized person is the ideological approach. Like, how are you treating people? How does your work reflect on the real world? And what are you saying about the real world implications of your work? And so when I find that, and it's not that I'm looking for ideological purity, because one, that doesn't exist, and two, like, then I would never be able to ever consume anything ever. It's just like, okay, I'm allowed to dislike things, you know, like Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a show that I followed for years and I loved it. I watched every episode. It was super fun, but I could still admit it's propaganda, which is its own thing, and it's fat phobic, like really aggressively. Like, sometimes they like, Fox canceled it and then another network bought it and then coronavirus happened, so like it hasn't come back yet, but when it does, I'm still good. Like, I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah.
And so like I'm allowed to, like, when an entire episode's plot would revolve around making fun of the fat characters for being fat, haha, fatty, fat, I would be like, this sucks, you guys, and you should know better, because clearly you do know better in literally everything else. And so it's not that I'm like, fuck you for not being absolutely perfect in everything. It's like, I will admit, I will notice flaws when they happen, and I will do my best to try and not replicate those flaws when I go and create my own stuff. But if someone else chooses to completely reject something because of that, they have a right to, because that shit hurts. And it hurts to have to run into it over and over and over again.
If you haven't noticed, I'm not a small guy, so I see that part.
Yeah, no, like, it sucks. I hate those characters. Every time they would, like, be a prominent part of the episode, I was like, here we fucking go. It's just gonna be fat jokes for 20 minutes. And I was not here for it, because they knew better. They did not make those kinds of jokes about other people. And I was like, guys, like, you, like, and that was part of my frustration. I'm like, you clearly know better. You know where the line is drawn with other people. Why is this the place that you like, let yourselves have a little fun at the
The only
expense of.
time I found any real representation for myself as a larger guy and was fucking Dan Connor from the original Roseanne show. You know what I mean? I mean, he was a big, hefty dude who worked fucking hard, took care of his family and everything like that. And he was like he's the most positive role model I can think of from fucking anything that involved any type of large character. Otherwise, they're comic relief, they're villains, they're the heavies, they're not nothing's there to be taken seriously.
No.
So it's kind of fucking shitty that I've got one. And I'm Hispanic and he's white, so there you go.
Yeah, and don't even get me started on the fact that I'm a literal bearded lady. Bro, the number of times I have been compared to the bearded lady in a American Horror Story season, literally called Freak Show. That's and I do love that season. I rewatch it over and over again because I'm like, she gets it. And I'm like, why does she get it, sweetie? Why does she get it? And The Greatest Showman, also, where the ensemble cast are referred to as the Freaks. Which is why, I make a point of making at least one bearded lady character in everything that I create, because I have multiple creative projects going on, and they are love interests and they are protagonists, and it's not a matter of author insert as much as it's for the love of God, if no one else is gonna make characters that aren't in a freak show.
D&D made bearded ladies a long time ago.
The creators of Lord of the Rings are cowards for not giving me lady dwarves, and I will be collecting reparations. Come on, man. It's so easy. Just put some extra braids, give them some flowers in there. It's the same thing.
And it was like, well, how can you tell the guys from the girls? The women don't have mustaches.
Yeah, the women don't have mustaches. They have extra braids. They braid their braids.
Yeah, they did reference it, but they didn't put it on screen. But anyway, so the basic gist of the story is that there is tons of problems that that are very well displayed with a lot of the authors that we have been talking about. The main issues are Terry Pratchett's words were very interesting. Everything Terry Pratchett fucking wrote was very interesting. Terry Pratchett's another one of my favorites. I don't really know if he did much representation. He did have gay characters. He did. I'm just trying to think. He's written so much, so I'm trying to remember if he covered all the bases. Oh yeah, well.
You're
neurodivergent. Yep. But yes, so yeah, Terry Pratchett did a lot of that, and he covered a lot of ground with that. Neil Gaiman as well. There are authors who, just through their natural writing and what they've experienced and what they bring to these stories, write and craft characters who can at least help with representation. I don't think any one author is ever going to be able to capture everything, because the one true thing about people in general is that everyone's unique and everyone is going to be looking for something different. And you'll find characters that you might find a character you completely identify with, except for these couple of things. But it's going to be the closest thing you get until you sit down and write your own novel.
Be like me, just make your own thing.
Yep. And that's another thing with modern media and the commonality and availability of it to everyone. I literally started writing this world for this game, and it frickin' took off. And I don't even know how many words I put in now, but I've dumped a crap ton of lore in our Discord. And it is just growing. And this has turned into a situation where it's probably going to turn into a source book that I might attempt to publish. But, it's all about making sure that we have... Oh, Jessica said Jim Davis.
I'm sorry, John. I'm so sorry.
John.
Okay, there's a so Jim Davis. Actually, wait. This is a great. Okay, this is we. Okay, bear with me.
Bearing.
Um, on the topic of, the work going in a direction the author never intended and never could
Mm-hmm.
have imagined. There, a couple of years ago, there was a subreddit called I'm Sorry John that popped up, and people started creating this kind of fan universe of the Garfield comics, um, where Garfield is an eldritch god who is like tormenting John, or like loves John but hates him, or like wants to eat. Oh, it's this whole thing of Garfield as this like evil, like unfathomable god, and it's kind of yeah, it's leaked into. Oh no,
Oh,
Fox Rider
Fox! Don't
oh no.
don't the
Oh
stream.
no.
Okay, Fox Rider, I told you that is not from any bot. That is a thing. You can't do all caps. You can do a couple of caps, but you can't do all
Fox Rider
caps.
got punted
Did she got punted? Did she get punted?
like for 60 seconds.
Oh, she got silenced for 60 seconds.
Oh,
Sorry, Fox. No all caps. It'll get you
but
in
yeah,
trouble.
it's this thing. It's this like Garfield is this like incomprehensible
He's an
monster,
eldritch
and like there's
being.
all these different designs, and there's like one really popular line is like I require lasagna, and people have made like games where you're John and you're running from evil Garfield. It's a whole thing, and like Jim Davis could never have imagined this, but it's taken up off. I'm literally on the subreddit right now, and the most recent post was made like 5 minutes ago. Like, and this started a couple of years ago. There's a YouTube creator who made like Zodiac Garfields, where like based on your zodiac sign, this is the evil Garfield that's coming for you, and he made it into a video game, and it's like it's a massive online community kind of fandom where like Garfield's like freaking an elder god, I guess. Like, and it's something that like I personally love it because I love horror, and I grew up reading the Garfield comics and like the big compilation books with like hundreds of them,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that this this weird thing that I liked as a kid combined it with another weird thing like with horror, and it's something where like I don't know if Jim Davis knows about it. I hope not, because I think he might take it as like we're demonizing his character when it's more just like we're all weird and stressed out and kind of crazy, so like this is how we're coping with the fact that like the world is ending or whatever. Everything seems so weird and meaningless and scary.
Yeah.
And I just scrolled past a woman who got a evil Garfield tattoo. Now people are doing it to SpongeBob and
Oh.
like Winnie the Pooh. Like, just because it's not even like edgy. Like it's not edgy. It's past that. It's like it's insane. But it's
But
something
once
where
again, that leads back to people taking what they want out of things, and like that once again revolves right back around to death of the author. Jim Henson is the father, the creator, or John Davis is the father and creator of Garfield. But look what's been done with it. Look what's been created from it.
I'm gonna send you the link to this so you can look at
Okay.
it later. It's ridiculous.
So,
But I still think it's cool. I still think
Of
it's
course
cool
it's
that
cool.
like this kind of collaborative creativity is happening for no reason, just for no reason.
and
Like
it's also one of the more horrible things about the way that our world works right now, because there's a meme that's going around on I don't remember where I saw it last. I think Facebook, but it really encapsulates the struggle that people are having right now. Because the meme says, "I really just want to be creative, but I'm just too exhausted from surviving."
yeah.
And that I think that hurts more than anything else, to know that there are people out there who they're just trying to make it through the day to day, because we don't have enough support for people, and we don't have enough out there to make sure that people can be okay to sit down and create and express themselves. It's a massive part of the human experience that we deny to too many people. And it's why we get a lot of the shit we have now. I mean, the depletion of funding from the arts has been exponential. And it just gets worse every year. So, but anyway, I think we have beaten this horse just about to absolute death. If you want to support J.K. Rowling, just don't support her.
Support her unlicensed stuff. Support unlicensed stuff.
And support her fans.
Yeah.
The ones who take what she wrote and make it into something else. You know, read the fanfics, do stuff like that. You know, we can't stop her from making money from Harry Potter. There's just nothing can be done. Use your voice. If someone says they love Harry Potter, you know, call them out on it. Say, you know, I know you may love Harry Potter. What about Rowling? And if they say, well, fuck Rowling, just let it go. They know. Yeah. They know. They just love the world. You know, sometimes even though it's not right, we have to let things go because some people really need that. I think Foxwriter said that, you know, Rowling's work got her through her senior year of high school. Mm-hmm. You know, some people need it. So, you know, if someone loves it but understands what Rowling is, just let it go. If someone doesn't know, don't just slam them in the... Oops, hang on. Okay, so don't just slam them in the face with it.
Yeah.
You know, let them know that they're probably going to have problems dealing with this, and then express to them what she's done. If they don't have a problem with it at that point, then, you know, re-examine your friends.
Period.
But if they do, then make sure that, you know, you're there for them, because there are going to be people out there who don't know. And so it's going to be a shock. And of course, if your friends support J.K. Rowling and don't care, then that's up to you guys. You know, I mean, we're not going to ever tell you who to be friends with. And we know that people's interpersonal relationships develop for many more reasons than just fandom. But, you know, just do your best. Be better. Mm-hmm. And we will try and be better. And we are going to go ahead and let you guys go for the evening. Milagros, thank you so much again for coming on tonight. Thank you for not making me do this by myself.
Yeah, and, no, this is a pleasure. I love talking about this kind of stuff.
And remember, ladies and gentlemen, we will be debuting Kingdoms of Mist next week on Wednesday. That is going to be the 24th of March, 4 days before my birthday, when I turn 50. So we're going to be debuting Kingdoms of Mist on the 24th of March. Please, if you want to find out any information about Kingdoms of Mist, join our Discord. I mean, I put out lore probably about every 2 to 3 days. Okay? So if you guys want... Hey, it worked! If you guys want to help out and you want to join Discord, our Discord, we would love to have you. I would love to get opinions of my work. I would love to get input from you guys. So please join our Discord and join in the conversation. At Dinner and Game, we always save you a seat at the table, and we always want to have discussion at that table. And Discord is just another place for it. We do have a Facebook. I've put the links up there before. But Facebook is more of, you know, us informing you guys. We do have a Facebook group too that you can get to from our Facebook page, which is more of all our people posting stuff, and they post prolifically. The Facebook group is insanely active. I'll just say that. There's like about 20 to 30 posts a day. And so it is one of those things where it's just going to go. So, but yes, if you want to join our Facebook as well, and if you want to support us, there's multiple ways to do it. The easiest one, since you're already here, subscribe. It gives us a little bit of revenue, gives us a little bit of support, and it, you know, really helps us know that you like what we're doing. And if you want to, you can also go ahead and do support us on Patreon. There's lots of Patreon rewards. One of the Patreon reward levels is you get to join our Skype calls, both before the show, after the show, and sometimes when we do longer format shows, we take breaks in the middle. You can come on in the middle as well. We just ask you stay muted. I think it's either on all levels of the Patreon or like at least the $3 level or higher. And so that one gives you access to our Discord. You get special titles in our Discord. You get access to our Skype calls, and we're going to, as soon as we get enough people on Patreon, we're going to start running a once a month Patreon only game where one of us is going to come out and they're going to run a game for a table of Patreon subscribers. We're going to be working on that and getting all that out to you guys, and let us know what else we can do for you. There's lots of Patreon reward levels, so go check that out. Other than that, thank you all so much for joining us. Hopefully we will see you on Wednesday for the debut of Kingdoms of Mist. It is a very interesting take on fantasy. It is a very interesting take on the 5e world. I just posted out some new things that are going to be probably making some people mad, but I had some thoughts, so we'll have discussions. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and do something that we try and do every show, and that is we are going to do something called a raid. Now, the reason we do raids is to try and draw attention to other creators. Normally we have a much bigger audience than this, but you know, it was only the two of us, so I can understand. But we're going to raid another stream called Matty Morgs, who's playing Dungeons and Dragons. He's got about 17 people watching, so we're going to go in there, make some noise, let them know that Dinner in the Game came in, and give them a follow if you can. I already follow them, but give them a follow, because anything we can do to help out smaller creators, we're going to do. So, because we're a smaller creator. So everyone, please do your best. It looks like he might be painting minis. That's neat.
Ooh.
It's paint night. Yay! So he's going to be painting minis. So we're going to go ahead and say hi. Give him a like, give him a follow, and tell him that Dinner in a Game sent you. Show everyone love, because everyone deserves it. And we will see you guys on Wednesday, and we hope that you will join us. Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.
Should be gone.